So I've been thinking a lot recently about nature versus nurture for a couple of reasons, but basically, there's a thought of like how much is nature, how much is nurture, and I kind of have my thesis, okay, on what nurture gets you and what nature gets you, is that 99% of where people are at and the gap between where they're at and their potential, 99% of that gap is accounted for by nurture and by self-restriction and by emotionality. Like, for example, is like, oh no, I'm the kind of people who are like me. Poor people don't get jobs in air-conditioned offices and move to New York City and become the GOAT at whatever the thing I'm focused on is. Like, oh no, my group, the X doesn't do Y, women don't do Y, like X doesn't do Y. This kind of like thing is like, oh geez, I can't do it. This accounts for like 99% of that gap. Is like if you just sit down and commit, you can get done most of what you want to get done. If you just take the next step, really, and I hope I've repeated this advice in a couple different videos, but if you want to be like a top 1% person in any given industry, in any given job, in any given thing, if you like show up on time and do what you're supposed to do consistently and don't act crazy and whine and whinge and complain about things, and like make other people's lives harder and like just act weird and crazy, you're like in the top 1% of any group of anything that you've ever done ever. It's like super easy. But you have to be consistent. You have to believe that you can do it and you have to go at it every single day. And I feel like nurture gives you a lot of that. Is like, you could do anything. You could do anything. Oh, come here. Let me give you a big hug. You're loved. You're appreciated. Go ahead and do anything. And I think that gets you through a lot of that stuff. But then where does nature come in? Where do genes come in? Okay. This is the real truth. Once you're in that 1%, okay, there's going to be a task, let's say in computer science and programming, where you sit down and you think about it and you have all the information in front of you and you run through a bunch of ideas and you go through the engineering process that is infallible. But then there's like this requirement that you have like this spark of creativity, like what are the different options available? And you find option A, option B, option C, and you start it for 15 minutes, okay? And then another guy comes and he's like, option D. And you can, and you're like, fuck, option D is so much better. And you can build up this skill over time, right? But there's like a bunch of sub skills. Like you know all the tools you have available, and that's something you just get over time, right? It's like, oh, I've used tool X, tool Y, tool Z. I've seen how they're applied. Here's what I have in my toolbox. Here's what I can do with them, and I can combine them in different ways. But the ability to like, once you have 20 different tools available for 20 different situations, the ability to just like very quickly, like zoom out and assess the situation, and then zoom out and see all the different tools available, and for these things to arise in consciousness, for these different things to arise. I pinky promise to you, and maybe this is an experience that most people can't, what is the word? Can't map with, but there's a point where the limiting factor becomes like just, waiting for something to show up in consciousness in your mind, being given to you by your muses, and then tilting your head and then waiting again, and then tilting your head the other way and then waiting again, and then going in the shower and kind of like rolling your eyes around and like waiting again. And like a lot of the process for doing really cool, really important things and working through really, really challenging problems is just begging your muses to give you the answer. And there's like a bunch of sub skills that go into this, is like, how good is your memory? Like, secret hint, there's no amount of hugs you can give a 2-year-old that's going to improve their memory. There's no shot that that's real. It just can't be. Like, I don't know what to say. There's no shot. And some people have like the perfect photographic memory, and I can't remember my favorite movie unless you give me like a pointer, or I have like hard-coded answers, but I can't list. I can't bring up 20 different movies. When I used to solve problems, because my memory is so uniquely bad, I would reconstruct things from first principles. That's why I liked math, is because you could reconstruct from first principles. You wouldn't need, if you had like a vague memory of like how something was supposed to work, you could just reconstruct from first principles and figure it out. And that's why I like computer science, because you can just always, as long as you know your basics, everything builds from the basics. And so it's, the tree is always the same, no matter what you lose from it. You don't need to memorize anything. So like memory, like ability to not just remember something, but remember like 20 different things and lay them out in front of you and then make a choice from the different options and combine them in creative ways. Like there's a point where you're not limited by like emotionality and worry and like, oh geez Louise, I'm so worried about something. There's a point where you're limited by like hard limits on like what you can do and how fast you can do it, and like slow, like speed, like the speed of things, like how quick you are. Like there's some people who are just quick with it. I don't know what to say, you know, like like there's just some people who are just so much quicker. I usually have to take a long pause, you know, 3-second pause. And I'm not saying like I'm pretty good at all these stats. Like I'm above average in most of these stats. Memory, definitely below average, probably far below average. Almost every other mental stat, above average. But these stats, because these are the limiting factors for a lot of people, but for me, you know, like this is what I think about every day is like these things that are fucking like hard coded. Like I can't do anything about that. Like that's very, very hard to deal with. And that's a limiting factor that you start running into at a certain point. And so yeah, just kind of my thoughts on that is like, you know, you can be basically anything, you know, you can rise to the top 1% of basically anything, but eventually you're going to get limited by not having the nine-tails fox inside of you. I'm going to cut things there, but the next video, okay, is how to be the GOAT. Okay, so we figured out how to get to the top 1%. Okay, we're gonna figure out how to be the GOAT. And really, you do need to have some of these stats in a good spot. And even to get to the top 1%, you need to have like average. Like you have to realize too. This is worth noting as like a pinprick here at the end of this is that when I say like 99% of people are limited by these emotionality things, which is a mean way of saying it. Like I have, you know, bad days too, where I'm not able to get anything done. And I'm not saying it's a bad, like, I'm not saying it makes you a worse person. It just is what it is, right? It's what limits most people. It's worth noting some people have stats that are so dumpstered. You know, think about, you know, you have like 20 different stats, like how good is your left arm? You know, like how good is your fucking your legs? You might be paraplegic. Most people, 1 in 1,000 people, like in all these stats, you are almost certainly going to be in the top 999 out of 1,000, right? But if there's 1,000 of these different things, it's very likely that almost everyone has a 1 in 1,000 issue because, and I'm talking really genetic issues, because you know, there's 1,000 different things that you can have problems with. So it's like, and the emotional element of the human experience is so vast that there's a lot of those. So it's like, I can't deal with people thinking little of me, you know, and I'm gonna go crazy when that starts to happen. I really have to convince them it's really important to me, and I can't deal with it. And I can't live with it. That's gonna be, you know, if you're like a 1 in 1,000, you know, struggle with that, that's gonna be like a fucking hard problem to solve, right? And then that's, you know, feels to me maybe a mix of both, like. You know, maybe if you're really happy with you are, like some of those stats come from nature, some of them come from nurture. There's some stuff like, oh, I literally have like various disabilities. Yeah. But yeah, okay, fun discussion. I think that kind of covers my thoughts on nature, nurture. Next video is going to be how to be the GOAT, okay? How to be the GOAT.